Speech. Today is all about speech. TED is all about speech. It's through speech that we spread good ideas. However, it's also through speech and through other forms of expression that we may spread hate. And today I want to spend a little bit of time for us to address the question of hate speech. Now, think of the latest news headline, the most recent issue regarding hate speech that grabbed your attention. It will probably be a global story, and it will be the repercussions of hate speech across borders that has captured the attention of us, of politicians, of policymakers around the world. Sometimes the repercussions are very bloody. Sometimes the consequences continue over months. It's as if the hatred and the response to that film, that cartoon, that article, that book becomes resuscitated a long time later and continues to plague us. But I want to suggest that we should, if I speak to my 7-year-old, if we speak to 5-year-olds, we would say, that's not a very nice thing to say, darling, okay? But as an international community or as a national community, we should distinguish between different kinds of hate speech. And sometimes we confuse them. And that's a problem because there should be a well-calibrated and careful attention to different kinds of hate speech. In fact, we should sometimes intentionally ignore hate speech. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, said a few weeks ago that we should sometimes deny the oxygen of publicity to hate speech because otherwise we feed it ourselves. A trashy film, a trashy YouTube video, book, novel, article, it might have got some viewers, some readers, but should we really fuel that by giving it undue attention? It's here where it's worth considering different kinds of things that we often package together as hate speech. As I said, these are all not very nice. You wouldn't encourage your 5-year-old to engage in it. But as an international community, let's be a little bit more careful about what we're talking about. Perhaps we're talking about discriminatory speech. This could be in comedy. This can become part of cultures, and it's very unfortunate. It might be hate speech. So it's increased in gravity and is less pleasant, even less pleasant. It could be incitement to violence, so that you're getting others to act and to join you in that hatred. And then incitement to terrorism, incitement to genocide that I will not be discussing today. And it's that intersection between hate speech and incitement to violence that I want us to concentrate on today. What is the difference? As I said, even those 5 categories or types of speech that I suggested sometimes are all packaged together and labeled hate speech. But strictly speaking, where do we draw the line between hate speech and incitement to violence? And a friend and a good author has given us a rule of thumb, and she says, Susan Benesch, says that incitement to violence is where my speech gets others to act and to act violently. So it's not my act. You may consider the context, you may consider my intent, you may consider the actual words that I used, but actually what matters in transitioning from hate speech to incitement to violence is how my speech incites others to act. Now, all the pictures that came to your mind where you thought about hate speech and incitement to violence, think about them and think of the main actors. And what I want to suggest here today is something that I don't think the international community, you and I, governments, politicians, and all those policymakers are giving enough attention to. And that is that incitement to violence is much, much worse where it is the government or government actors that are inciting to violence. This seems very obvious if you think about the worst consequences of incitement to violence in the world today. you may be thinking of the Holocaust, you may be thinking of the Rwandan genocide, and it is clear that government actors were part of the incitement. And why it becomes particularly worrisome, and it might lead to serious consequences, is because they have the power. They're not even a political party that may gain power. They don't have just a bunch of parliamentarians standing for the elections. They are already in power. They have the resources, and often there is a build-up time. If you go to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, or any memorial to genocide, etc., you will find that actually there are traces of the build-up of that incitement to violence by the government of the time. I want to look at just one example. Of course, there are other examples to draw from, and indeed, even in Iran, I could have drawn from many other examples of minorities, Azeris, Kurds, Baluch, Arabs, Christians, Jews, that to one extent or another are currently suffering from incitement from the government of Iran. What I want to look at, though, is the situation of the Bahais in Iran and how the government for 33 years in Iran has been building up its project of destroying this religious community. First, we'll look at a few slides to see what have been the media, what media has the government used in order to build up this incitement. And secondly, we'll look at a few slides about just a few of the consequences of this 33 years of persecution. This slide is used in many Iranian anti-government websites. So a Baha'i is depicted with the shroud of death calling you to death. So Baha'is kill you, or the Baha'i faith is destructive. This is not a trailer to a horror movie. Again, this is a depiction of Baha'is by the Iranian government in its websites, also in Kalameh, a news report from last year in Iran. This is a 2011, not a story, a reality. Here, you need to have a little bit more background. Here, there's a suggestion of tombstones burning. It creates a picture of a cultish, dangerous community, and again, it's a depiction of Baha'is in Iran. It's set against a holy place for Baha'is, the shrine of Baha'u'llah. So, and this is a book from 2008 from the city of Shiraz, where Baha'is are depicted as being deceitful. It's a story, but the storyline is about Baha'is and how deceitful they are. So we have this picture of horror, death, they kill you, they're deceitful. And I forgot to say in the earlier slide that the Kalameh website said that Baha'is get together on Muslim holy days and they engage in corrupt and immoral practices. I'm sure you can imagine what they talked about. So when we're talking about incitement to violence, we are no longer actually just talking about speech. We are talking about consequences and the acts that result from that speech. So what are just a few of the traces of the results of this buildup of incitement by the Iranian government? Now, as I said, the incitement here is not alone. The incitement is in the hands of government. So whether in this instance or whether in the Holocaust or whether in the, and I'm not comparing suffering, I think that's incredibly distasteful, but I just want to suggest to you that when the government is involved, there is a project of destruction, and the incitement to violence by the government is just part of the tools that they are using. So in the case of the Baha'is in Iran, this is, again, a Baha'i holy place, the House of the Bab in Shiraz, 1979, and this is what was done to it. Now it's even razed to the ground and is a roundabout. It's not only community properties that have been destroyed. This is a house in Abadeh. It's a 2008 picture, and this is what they've done to an individual member of the Baha'i faith. And this is what they've done. A bulldozer arrived and destroyed the property. Even architectural gems. This is the house of the father of the founder of the Baha'i faith. And in Tehran, this was destroyed in 2004. You might think for cultural and historical reasons, a building might be spared, but because of the association, then that too was destroyed. Of course, it's not just physical destruction, there's a strong human story and reality there as well. These are 7 representatives of the Baha'i community of Iran who have been in prison since spring 2009. So, along with the project of destruction, the incitement in the hands of government, 200 people have been killed, thousands have been tortured, and many are facing prison sentences. I just want to say that when we talk about hate speech, we often think about hate speech beyond borders. And that should, of course, get attention as well. But what is even more grievous is where a government has had a long-standing project itself. The government itself is spearheading, engineering that hate speech and incitement. And I think we should be particularly vigilant of that kind of incitement, even if it is within the borders of one country. Thank you for your time.